G'day viewers, Chris Pickett from Vee Two Australia. This is John, and so the Chris and John show. Brook's off doing something else at the moment, so we're going to talk about Project 860. This is episode 14, and these are their heads. Now, these are what we call springer heads. You know, you'll have your Desmo engine and your valve spring engines, and so being an 860 GDS, these are the original heads. Now, John is the guy that does basically all our heads here, so he's going to talk us through these heads have already been blasted by Craig. Craig is the guy that puts all the heads together. John and Craig work closely together. John usually does all the valve seats and the valve guides, and he's going to talk us through the process of how you do that properly. There's some people who will just bash them in and whatnot, which is not, I guess you'd say, conducive, is that the right word, to longevity. It needs to be done properly, doesn't it?
It needs to be done properly. There's a lot involved in taking them out, measuring, looking at tolerances and putting them back together. It's a fair process.
And you'll notice that it's pretty cold here this morning, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, what I'm going to do is like we've been doing, I'll get up behind the camera so I can get some close-ups and whatnot. This is really interesting. I find this very interesting, and it's, I'll let you take over, and if I might have to ask you some questions, mate.
Feel free.
Righto, okay.
The first step of the process is we've got to take the old guides out. And we drift them out. We don't heat the heads up to take the guides out. We use a drift to punch them out, and we feel when they're coming out, whether they're in the hole tightly or loosely or firm, and then we record all of that. So when we're making the new guide, we make new guides individual to suit each hole. So we measure the hole. The standard guides come in 0.05 increments. We actually measure the hole and then add 0.05 to the diameter, so there's a 0.05 interference fit. Once the guides are out, then we've got to get the seats out. The method we use is to weld them out. We've got the luxury of having a lot of old valves here, so we use an old valve and weld it into the seat, and then once they cool down, we punch them out from behind. Other places that don't have the luxury of having so many old valves, maybe we'll machine up a disc that just fits in there, weld the disc in, and then put a punch through the guide hole to take them out.
Now, can I just butt in there for a second? To answer well, there was one question, I think, or a statement on a previous, the video we were talking about earlier of you welding the valve to the seat, which I can't find anymore, but someone had mentioned because the seats are made of phosphor bronze or kryptonite or some bloody thing that you can't weld them properly. That's not the aim. We're not trying to weld, have a perfect weld of the valve to the seat because they're totally different materials. It's just enough so that we can drive the seat out. Yes. That's all we're doing.
And it's the heat that really gets them out.
Yeah.
Once they're welded and the valve is actually attached, when they cool down, the seat shrinks and the head's still warm, and you can get them out a lot more freely. You're correct, the phosphor bronze doesn't want to be welded. It's not a material that is conducive to welding, but it welds it enough to be able to get them out.
Cool.
Then after we've stripped it all, we measure the old guides, we measure the guide bores, we measure the seat bore. Most of them are around a standard sort of size, but some of them that have been refurbished by someone else previously might not have had the same size seats, so they might have bored that out to a larger size hole. If that's the case, then we have to custom make a seat to suit the hole, and we make the seats approximately 0.2 of a mil bigger than what the hole is. So there's 0.2 of a mil interference when the seat goes in, and we overcome that interference by heating the head up. We heat the head to 250 degrees to put the seats in, and then as it's cooling down and it gets to 150 degrees, that's when we put the guides in.
I told everyone to be quiet. Now we'll have to black band them, whoever it is.
So that's the process we're going to look at now. We're going to punch the guides out, weld the seats out, measure everything up, then go and select the seats and the guides that we want to put in. The guides, we make our own guides. We don't use a top hat seal on the guide. We use an internal O-ring in the valve guide itself, and we custom finish machine. I think the guides that we make are 14 mil in diameter, and most of the guides that we use are between 13 and 13.3 or 13.4. So once we've measured the guide holes, we finish machine the guides down to the specific size we need for each individual hole, because typical Ducati, no two holes are the same. Rightio, the first step is to get the guides out. We've got a drift that's smaller than the diameter of the hole, and it's a very simple, basic hitting them out. As you can hear, you can tell by the sound of when you're hitting whether they're tight in the hole. I would say that was firm. So this is a front exhaust. I'll write that down as being firm in the hole. If they're really tight, the hammer will bounce off and it sings. And if they're loose, it'll be a dull thud. So that one was the same. I would say that was firm. So we'll write that down as firm. Another thing that's fairly important to do is, as you punch the guide out, just write onto it which hole it came from. So this is the rear exhaust. That way when we come to do all the measuring, we're measuring the right old guide to the right hole. And once again, they were both what I would call firm. Not tight, but not loose. So I'll mark them both down as being firm. So the next step is to weld the seats out. We've previously prepared a couple. We use exhaust valves because they're a little bit smaller and they fit down inside the seat, because you don't want to, when you're welding in here, you don't want to weld up onto the shoulder of the seat and hit the aluminium. You want to be down here in the middle of the seat to prevent any weld damage to the head itself. So that's all we need to do when we're welding. It's not a pretty weld, but it'll grip it enough so that when it cools down, we can get the hammer and punch the back of the valve and get it out. So I'll just do the other side. I'll do the inlet now. We weld, when we're welding on an aluminium, we weld on an aluminium sheet. If that was sitting on the bench on the steel, for some reason, it'll arc out between the steel and the head and actually put burn marks on the head. But if you do it on a sheet of aluminium, for some reason, I don't know the science behind it, but that's not the case. Normally I do the second head now, which gives this head a little bit of time to cool down, and then we get the maximum effect. But I'll give it a go now. That one popped out lovely. Simple as that. That leaves the guide bore and seat bore holes exposed, ready for us to now measure everything up and prepare the new seats and the new guides to go back in there. Okay, well I'll do the second head now, the front head now. Then I can get in and measure the guide bores and the seat bores, check for any damage or any cracks, and then write a list of all the parts we need and what sizes we need to make the new seats and the new guides before installing them in the next episode. So hopefully these ones will punch out just as easy as the first one. And that's how it's done. All right, we're back. The seats and guides are out. The next step is to measure the seat bores and also the guide bores. When we measure the seat bores, we measure the diameter, we measure the depth, we measure the diameter of the port, and then we'll custom make a seat to suit that hole so that obviously it fits diameter wise and depth wise, because the depths vary, especially if someone else has worked on a cylinder head before. They might have bored it a little bit deeper, may have bored it bigger in diameter. And then the guide holes, we measure them front to back, and we also measure them sideways, because from the factory there's not very much support in the cylinder head for the guides, and during their life they've got a side load on them. It could make the guide hole oval. If that happens, then we'll have to ream it out so it's parallel. And then these are our guides that we make ourselves, and this nominal diameter on the outside, we make them about 14 mil, so we can make the hole 0.5 mil bigger if we need to ream it, and still be able to finish machine these down to suit the size hole that we've got. As I said before, I can tell you now, if I measure all those 4 guide holes, all 4 of them will be different. So we custom make a guide to suit each hole. This is the measuring gear. We use a telescopic bore gauge to measure the size of the bore. And then we measure that with a micrometer, which will give us the size of that particular bore, and then we record all that onto a job sheet, so that at the end of it we'll be able to, at a glance, we'll be able to look at the job sheet and know what size we've got to make each individual seat and each individual guide. The same with the guide bores. We'll measure with a telescopic gauge left to right and front to back, record that information, measure that with a micrometer, record that information, and that'll determine plus 0.05 of a mil what size we make the finished guide to. And then the port size itself, we'll measure that with a vernier. So then we know what size to make the internal diameter of the seat, so that it matches the size of the port. Some people, their heads have been worked on before and someone's gone mad in there with a porting tool and made that diameter bigger. Then we make the inside diameter of the seat bigger, so that it matches up as best we can. We get in there with the porting tool afterwards and blend it all, so it is a nice smooth fit, so there's no sharp edges, but we try and get the seat inside diameter as close as we can to the size of the port. Pull up a seat, Chris.
Yeah, pull up a seat. Righto, thanks for watching, everyone. If you like what you see, like and subscribe. Thanks, John. The next episode we'll talk about basically installing everything that we've just taken out, or John's just taken out. But also, you'll see in this video, I'll throw in some photos of the cases. We did talk a little bit about, or Brooke and I talked about when we're talking about the main bearing sleeves and what you need to do to prepare the cases for blasting. So Craig's done all that. He's not really worth videoing. We've talked about what he does is block off all the threaded holes and whatnot. Careful with all the oil galleries. He's very experienced at doing it. And it goes through the two-stage blasting process, so dry blasting and then wet blasting. So you'll see some photos of the cases prepared for first stage of blasting and then finished. So realistically, once we finish off these heads, we did show a video of pressing apart and together a crank, which is not the crank for this bike, but so we'll just do that on the side. It's the same process, so. And then it's putting the engine back together, really. Yeah, the body works well on the way. We've got a lot of stuff done. So thanks again for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to. And we'll see you next episode. Thank you.
Goodbye.